afterwards. We'll start now. And can I just welcome everybody to tonight's session. My name's Paul Kelly. I am the director of Breaking Ground, which launched at the weekend. And Breaking Ground is the new community-led housing hub for the Liverpool City region, funded by Power to Change and the Community-Led Homes Partnership. We've launched this week with a festival of this is 7 of 18 events we're doing over the next 10 days. And really what we're trying to do is explore all aspects of community-led housing as different models have been emerging. But obviously the one that's most pertinent to Liverpool and most kind of exciting for us in this region is the mighty, may I say, cooperative movement, housing cooperative movement. It's obviously in the DNA of Liverpool and how we've done things in the past. And so tonight's session is very much about looking in a bit more detail at the history of that movement, the national picture, and maybe have some questions at the end and some discussion about where we see it going into the future. I'm really pleased to have a great lineup of speakers talking tonight. And I'm going to pass over to Paula Farrow, who is the chair of the Confederation of Cooperative Housing, who's going to guide us through the event tonight. Thank you, Paula, for being here.
That's all right, thank you. So we've got quite a busy agenda, as you can, for people that know what is actually going on. So I'm going to be quite tight on time for you speakers. I'm really sorry. Just to let you know, obviously you'll be watching everything. I'm going to do a Q&A at the end. And then I think how we'll do is we'll collate all the questions that are asked, and then it'll be answered in one long answer. I think that's going to be the best thing. Okay, so first I'm going to call for Nic Bliss, who's from the Confederation of Cooperative Housing. So Nic's going to be talking about what the CCH have been doing and also what the national context is. So I'll hand over to you, Nic.
Hello everybody. Are you going to put up my slides for me, Paul? Hello everybody, I hope everybody can see that. There's a lovely dog, I'm not quite sure. Right, okay, so yeah, the mighty housing cooperative movement. Yes, well I'll let you judge how mighty it is, but next slide please. Sorry, yes. So back in 2009 there was a report called Bringing Democracy Home that was produced that sort of summarised what exists in our sector. 836 cooperative and mutual housing organisations in the UK, 169,000 homes, and some of them owned, some of them managed. Good proportion of them registered with UK regulators, as in the regulatory bodies in England and Scotland, but the vast majority all in England. So that was actually the size of the sector at that point. I mean, it might have grown slightly since then, but not an awful lot. Next slide, Paul. The question about this is that, if I get the next slide, is that, yeah, it's 0.6% of the UK housing supply, or was then. So it's a tiny percentage of the UK housing supply, which compares to these kind of percentages across other European countries. So, Scandinavia obviously doing quite well in the sector. Austria, Germany, big players, and so on. So, there's a lot more that could be done through cooperative housing, and obviously our aim in terms of the work that we're doing is to try and make that happen. Next slide, Paul. So I'm from the Confederation of Cooperative Housing, which is the national representative body for UK cooperative housing. We have 190 odd member organisations. Most of them are what we call registered provider housing cooperatives, as in registered with the government regulator. Many of them are from Merseyside, and you're going to hear from some of the Merseyside co-ops and North West Housing Services a bit later. Obviously, because of our membership, a lot of what we do is about providing advice and support on setting up and how to run housing cooperatives. But we also generally support other forms of community-led housing. And I understand from Paul that you've been having some fantastic sessions with other bits of the community-led housing sector, and we've we've worked with a number of different types of community-led housing organisation. And as part of that, we as the CCH, we've been part of, there's been a partnership working with government on the framework that exists nationally for community-led housing. And some of you may well be aware that, they recently agreed to continue to provide community housing fund to enable the support for groups to set up, which is good news, and obviously we hope that will deliver many more homes. So some key parts of what we've been doing actually is we've put together a national training and accreditation program for community-led housing. So we've been working with a lot of people to help them become sort of enablers for community-led housing. And when we started that, there were very few people who actually had the skills to help groups set up and all the rest of it. And so we've been working. We initially started out saying that we were going to do about 4 courses. We're now just starting the 15th, so there's a lot of interest in there. There's a buzz right across the country in terms of community-led housing. Your councillor Sarah Doyle, who I think may be here by now, but I didn't see her, but she's I think she might be attending. She's part of our 15th cohort of training, so it's great, and she's really enthusiastic, which is great. And another spin-off from that actually has been that we've also set up this local authority group for community-led housing, mainly because people from local authorities were saying to us that they wanted a forum to be able to discuss community-led housing. So if anybody's got contacts with people in local authorities who are not already part of that group, please get in touch with them. And I've flagged up here, and I'm sure Paul will send you the slides after the event. I've flagged up, we've got a bunch of case studies on our website of recent developments of community-led housing, including co-ops obviously, but also other types. And the great thing about it is the enormous diversity and just how fantastic people are doing in terms of actually making these things happen in some quite difficult economic circumstances in some cases. Next slide, Paul. I'm just going to quickly touch on 3. Paul asked me to give you some examples of cooperative housing developments that are happening sort of at the minute. And so I've got three ones. And I'm looking specifically, one example on a new housing cooperative, one that's an existing housing co-op that's building more homes, and one that's kind of a bit tentative and a little bit cheeky, but it's about, it's just sowing the potential of a larger housing cooperative. And I'll get onto that, but I'll go through these relatively quickly. Next slide, Paul. So first, the new housing cooperative is Bunker Housing Cooperative in Brighton, which is a fantastic co-op, and it's it's great stuff what they're doing there. Providing homes for people in housing need in Brighton, which is not an easy thing to do because their land prices are through the roof. But they've had sort of a long-term partnership in Brighton between some of the housing cooperatives there and the local authority, and so this is a co-op that's building on various bits of local authority infill lands, and they've got 4 development phases, which is going to end up with 15 homes for those 4 development phases. Hopefully they'll go on to do more after that. Their first scheme was done last year in April. They moved in, and that was actually built using loan stock, as in getting people to put up lend money to the co-op initially, and also a mortgage from the Ecology Building Society. And in terms of that relationship with the local authority has been very enthusiastically supporting them and obviously providing them with the infill land. I'm not sure that it's free, but it's it's access to it, and they've got various flexible nominations arrangement because people are all being housed off the local authority waiting list. So it's how they're doing that is being negotiated, and there's also talk with them at about the initials, Public Sector Works Board lending. So this is actually the council using its borrowing facilities to help support them, and I don't think that's been done yet, but there is talk about this, and so that's quite an interesting thing. Now, in terms of Bunker, the other key factor with them is that they're going to become a registered provider themselves. So it's a new registered provider, which is quite a difficult procedure to go through to actually register, but they're going through that process, which is great. Next slide. That's Bunker. 2020 Housing Co-op. This is one I know quite well because it's my co-op, and I'm sorry if I'm being a bit cheeky using my example, but I thought it was the easiest one I could talk about. So we're obviously an existing registered provider housing co-op, been around since 1982, got 49 houses and flats, and we're currently working to develop 11 new flats. This is on Birmingham City Council land, and we've obviously been in negotiations with Birmingham about that. We're working with the Housing Association to help us do the development process called Accord Housing. We're just about to submit for planning permission. There's been various discussions, pre-planning and stuff going on, and one of the key little peccadillos we came across is because it's next door to a curry house, so they made us do an odour survey. I've never come across an odour survey. We had to do an odour survey, and anyway, we're going to be funded through the approved housing programme, sorry for the initials again, and through loan funding obviously, and I can't remember this frightening number, something like 600,000 of grants and 700,000 or something of loan funding, something like that. Our business plan is pretty strong anyway, so that's good, and we're very much working to a high environmental spec because that's what the kind of local neighbourhood, councillors and people want us to do, and I don't know the full details of that because it's not my forte, but it's things like solar power and things to do with the heating to make sure that fuel bills are next to nothing and what have you, and also low car use. We're going for just 2 parking spaces because it's on a bus route, and we're aiming this at sort of young people who they won't have a car, hopefully, and that's a nice picture of the mock-up of it. And I think it might have been changed because the planners objected to something, but it's something like that. Okay, next one. And my final one is this one. So this is a little bit of a cheat because this is in Zurich. Yeah. So I think Paul wanted me to sort of flag up the potential, and I think, this is about vision, guys. We can do anything here, so this is called Mehr als Wohnen. And my partner who can speak German tells me I keep pronouncing that wrong, but Mehr als Wohnen means more than housing, and Bürgerschaft is housing co-op. So this was about the city of Zurich, so the municipality, their equivalent of a local authority, basically decided that they had a problem with 40,000 square meters of derelict land, former sort of industry land and so on, and they didn't know quite what to do it. They didn't want to flog it on the open market, so they went to some existing co-ops and said, can you help us work to develop this scheme? And it's ended up with this fantastic scheme, 370 apartments. They've got these things called cluster units, which is a bit like co-housing. The residents, 1,000-odd residents moved in between those years. Plus, the key factor of this is it is more than just housing, 750 square metres of facilities. So shops, workspaces, restaurant, hotel. We went and visited there, and I recommend a visit to it. We stayed in the hotel there. It's a great place. Children's nursery, brilliant stuff. They're going on to create some more development elsewhere, and again, no car policy, car renting, e-bikes and all this kind of stuff. It's a fantastic scheme, and one of the things we're actually setting up for local authorities, actually particularly, is a set with people from Mehr als Wohnen at the end of April. So if people are interested in participating in that, if they're from a local authority, please get in touch with me, because we want to just kind of sow some seeds here, because what this says to me is actually, if we have the imagination and the vision, we can make anything happen. And on that note, I shall hand over to my friends in Merseyside who've been making it happen for years.
Thanks for that, Nick.
I'm not sure who the dog is, but there you go.
Right, okay. That was really interesting, thank you. So we're now going to hand over to North West Housing Services. So I think first up is going to be Phil.
That's right.
Earl. And he's going to be then followed by John and, sorry, it's all these names I've got everywhere. Yeah, it's going to be John and a couple of board members, I think, who are going to do a slide as well, and Kevin. But then what we're going to, I think there's going to be some interaction from Brian O'Hare from Huyton Community Co-op for the elderly, and also John Fairhurst from Princess Park Housing Co-op, who they will both join the discussion as well. Okay, so I'll hand over to you first. That's fine, Phil.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, so we've got a few speakers, so there might be a bit of jumping about, but I hope it's not too off-putting. You can follow everything. If I have the next slide, please. Okay, so Paula's introduced everybody. I'm the Chief Exec of North West Housing. Kevin Banner, being from later, is our Finance Director, and John McGuigan's our Business Development Manager. And John Fairhurst and Brian O'Hare are chairs of two of our co-ops. They'll tell you a little bit more about those later on. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about North West Housing Services for anybody who doesn't know about us. We do keep quite a low profile, so that could be possible. I'm going to tell you a bit about our members, our member organisations, and then John's going to go into a bit more detail about the housing cooperatives on Merseyside, some recent growth initiatives that the co-ops have been involved in, and then Kev's going to wind up with some talk about our future ambitions and maybe where we can take it from here with the help of the hub. And I should just say, really, we're absolutely delighted that the hub's been established. The work Paul's done already has been great. I'm really excited about it, and it's got our full support. So we'll do everything we can to help the hub achieve its goals. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so North West Housing. So we were established in 2006, but staff who started work then had already been working with the co-ops for many years before that. We were a business unit within CDS Liverpool, which some people may have heard of. So our history goes back even further than that, but the company itself was established in 2006. We're registered under the Cooperative and Community Benefit Societies Act, so we're what's usually known as a secondary co-op. We are member-owned and controlled, so our members are the organisations we provide services to, mostly the co-ops, and they each hold a £5 share in the company, and they control the company through the board. Our board is currently comprised of 8 reps from the co-ops and 2 specialists. Sasha's one of them, who's attending tonight. So we're a genuine co-op in that sense, and we're controlled by our members almost exclusively. We're not for profit, so there's nobody taking money out into anybody's pockets. Any surpluses that we make are either rebated back to members at the end of the year or invested in services for the future. So there's no profits. Back in 2012, legislation was introduced, 2012 Finance Act, which allowed mutual organisations to benefit from cost-sharing regulations. Effectively, what this means is because our members are mutually providing services to each other through the company, they're actually exempt from VAT. So our members don't pay VAT on the fees that they pay to the company for the services, which was obviously a major bonus back in 2012. We're also a CCH accredited service provider. I think we might have been the first one in the country, Nic will say, or John. I think we were, yes. First organisation in the country to be accredited by the CCH. So what that involves is periodically the CCH will come in and review the way we do things, check we're doing things in accordance with good practice and their standards, and then we get accreditation for a further 2 years. So just to briefly touch on the services, don't want to take too much time on this, but we provide to our members governance services. That's things like servicing committees, AGMs, regulatory work, submitting statutory returns and so on. We offer housing management services, so void control, rent arrears, lettings, working with the committees of our members, property maintenance and finance. So that's the sort of suite of services that we offer. Next slide, please. Okay, our mission, we aim to be the chosen service provider for housing co-ops, small landlords and other community-based organisations in the northwest of England. Fairly straightforward. But we have a wider vision as well, which is on the next slide, which is to be a force for good in our community. And we try and do that by sustaining the co-op sector in the region, but also by helping our members achieve their own objectives which they set for themselves, of course. So that's our sort of a wider vision. Next slide, please. Okay, I spoke about our membership a little bit earlier. So this is how it's comprised. So the vast majority of the members are housing co-ops. So we have 34 of those. 31 of those are in Merseyside. We've got one in Newcastle upon Tyne, one in Manchester, and one in Llangollen. But mostly Merseyside, that's where our roots are. 3 small housing associations, 5 leasehold management companies, 1 CLT, which is Granby. I think there's a session being run by Granby later on in the week. And 4 other social enterprises, so charities and KICs. So that's our membership. Just homing in on the actual housing co-ops, our Merseyside co-op members, we've got 24 co-ops in Liverpool, with a total of just under 1,600 properties in management. And in Knowsley, 7 co-ops with 221 units in management. So a total of 31 co-ops on Merseyside, just under 1,800 properties, just to give you an idea of the scale. And you'll notice there's just 2 local authorities represented there from the whole of Merseyside and the Liverpool City region. And there's sort of historic reasons for that, which probably we could go into on another occasion. But I know one of the aims of the hub is to spread that, spread the good news, as it were, to other local authority districts as well. So hopefully by the time the hub's got it up and running, we'll be doing just that. Okay, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to John, who's going to drill down a little bit more into the Merseyside housing co-ops themselves. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm John McGuigan, I'm Business Development Manager for North West Housing. And my brief for this session was to try and inspire everyone who's come along to hopefully get back to the good old days where the Merseyside housing co-ops were thriving. Sorry, they're still thriving now, but to get them back to that point where they were growing exponentially. I want to talk a little bit about the history, but I'm a bit nervous because I know there's someone from the old NHS days here, so I'm a bit conscious of my dates. Now, my understanding is that the history, the first co-ops on Merseyside were around about 1973, and these are the rehab co-ops, so the likes of Granby Co-op, Princes Park, Lark Lane, Lodge Lane, etc. They all started from 73 onwards up to about 1981, and they were rehab co-ops. So they acquired properties from either the city council or from private landlords, and were lucky enough to get grants off the government to refurbish those properties. They're what we call the rehab co-ops. And then round about 1977, Bill Halsall, who's one of our audience tonight, he was involved with some of those new build co-ops. Well, the first one, I believe, was Weller Street, who formed in 1977, and they eventually finished their scheme around about 1979, 1980. And these are what we call the new build co-ops. So these were the likes of Weller Street, Heskett Street, quite a few co-ops in the Dingle area of Liverpool. And then we had the Knowsley co-ops in Kirby and Huyton. They're the 2 different types of co-ops that we provide services for. Phil's touched on briefly about the management that we provide. So we do offer a full suite of services, but co-ops can pick and choose which ones they like to take from us. 1 or 2 of the co-ops do their own maintenance, but the majority of co-ops take the full suite of services off us. And I just wanted to touch very briefly on the rents. Co-op rents on Merseyside are the lowest in the city for social housing. They compare very favourably to housing associations and local authorities. And it's key point to note that the co-ops themselves set their own rents. So we go to them once a year and recommend a a slight increase, if you like, by the rate of inflation. At the end of the day, it's up to the co-ops to decide how much to increase the rents by, and some co-ops decide not to. It's their call. Next slide, please, Paul. So we've got a little table here of the benefits that we believe cooperative housing provide for residents. So if we start in the top left, they provide genuinely affordable homes. We believe co-op housing allows communities to take control and devolves power downwards rather than top down. We find there's a lot of community cohesion. We've noticed that it enhances people's life chances. It supports local businesses because all the contractors that the co-ops use are all local. Some of them are very, very small contractors, one-man bands, and it provides a lot of opportunities for people to make a good living. It provides employment in some cases. Some of the co-ops have got staff. Skills and training. Our committee members are all offered training to make sure that they've got the skills they need to govern the co-op. It provides sustainable neighbourhoods. Everyone looks after themselves in the main. And last but not least, there's a high demand for cooperative housing. So our co-op waiting lists are usually very full. And when they open the waiting lists, there's a very, very high demand to get on the lists. Next slide, please, Paul. I'm just going to talk about 4 or 5 recent growth initiatives. I'm going to be very recent. So the earliest one we're going to touch on is 2013. And the last one that we're going to talk about is on site at the moment. Next slide, please, Paul. The first slide is about Landgrove Community Housing Co-op in Everton. So they were established originally in 1987, and they own 50 properties at the moment. Back in 2012, they acquired a derelict site from Riverside Housing. They purchased that piece of land, but it had a block of flats, derelict flats on that piece of land. So the co-op demolished the block of flats, built 6 new houses, and this scheme was funded from their own reserves and a members loan from Northwest Housing. I know Phil didn't mention one of the benefits that we provide to our members is we offer members loans if they need any to build some new homes. Next slide, Paul. This is a photograph of Landgrove's development before they started on site. All the dignitaries, I think Phil's in there, I'm in there somewhere hiding, and some of the committee are on there as well. Next slide, Paul. Next one I'm going to talk about is Cherryfield Housing Co-op, which is in Kirby. Now this is a co-op that was established 31 years ago now. Sorry, not 31, 30 years ago. It was situated right in the heart of Kirby Town Centre, and round about 2011, 2012, Tesco wanted to redevelop the town centre, and the council put a compulsory purchase order on the co-op's properties. Eventually, Tesco agreed to move that co-op and build 19 new homes on a site which is about a mile and a half away. And the benefits of that was the tenants, the original tenants who were there, had a say in how their new homes were designed. Over the years, their needs had changed, so that the new properties were designed around their current needs. And that scheme was completed in 2014, and all of the development costs were met by Tesco, so the co-op didn't have to pay a penny towards that scheme. Next slide, Paul. But this is Cherryfield just before they went on site. Again, a lot of these photos are going to be of committee members and builders. Next slide, Paul. I'm going to hand you over now to John Fairhurst, who's going to talk briefly about his co-op, Prince's Park, and then I'll join you again in a sec. Over to you, John. If you can be unmuted.
Be on screen if you really want me. My engineer now.
Where is he? He's in.
Just come here, John.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there he is.
Be with you in a sec.
It's okay.
Sit there.
Technical issues.
Yeah.
Have you had any of them, Paul, as you've been doing this?
Even better when you unmute.
Not too many, actually.
Hi, John.
Am I now?
Yeah. Do not swear.
No, I won't. I honestly will not swear. I'm talking about Prince's Park Housing Cooperative, which I've been with for some 18 years now, and I've been chair for a considerable part of that time. We didn't really move that much for the majority of the time I've been here until where I live, which isn't far from where I am now in Northwest Housing. The house next door to me was owned by a housing association. At one minute it was there, the next minute it was tinned up and remained so for 2 years. Till in the end I got in touch with a group called Your Housing and asked could we buy it. It just seemed to be ludicrous, the fact that it was a wonderful building. I'm in the house next door, which were 3 great flats. So they told me that if I wanted to buy it, I also have to buy number 7, which was also tinned up, which didn't bother me one iota. I thought that was probably the best thing we could possibly do, to take 2 things and put them back into use. So this we did. And then at the same time as we were doing it, a further one, almost opposite Northwest here, belonging to Sanctuary Housing, who are a London-based company, though I just don't think it was a bit too far away for them anyway. Again, that was tinned up. And this was 9 one-bed flats. So we purchased that as well. And with the builders that we use throughout the co-ops, we use them to refurbish and modernise these houses as well. So for instance, the house that I was in, my living room was at the front. The house that we bought next door, the living rooms were at the back and the bedrooms were at the front, which was rather ludicrous because the sun came in the front all day. So we had to change the whole thing round. We also soundproofed them, we insulated them, we updated the kitchens. In other words, we gave people a property that you would come to and you just walk into and put your furniture down. The prices were very reasonable from the associations, and I think it might be a way to go. These were 3-bed houses, obviously in need of some repair, but they were £37,000 each. And this is only a couple of years ago, so they were great prices, as was the house from Sanctuary. That's got its own grounds as well. It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful detached property. The others were terraces. So we got in total, another 15 flats. Takes our total now up to 99. We're waiting for the next one to come along, hopefully at some time in the future. But I think opposite where I live, we have a group called Your Housing. They took over the Welsh streets and they bought all of these properties for £1, 300 of them from the council. And they've refurbished them to a remarkable standard, even down to retarmacking the roads, redoing the pavements, but the rents are astronomical. And they're all rented properties, but at least ours, we've got now 3 properties in that road, and we have a real community spirit there as well, which the co-ops tend to bring out in people. I really think that this, if it leads to more co-ops, because I don't really believe that the City Council know enough about co-ops. I think they just think they have shops, but we do have a lot of houses. And I think they should look more into it and give us more assistance as co-ops to be able to function and buy these properties. Having said that, there's not much more I can say, except that I must thank North West Housing for all the assistance they've given us during this time, and Mr. Bliss over there, who, cheers Nic, who also has been very informative every time we've met him. So that's it from me. I think Brian's going to have a word now with the elderly. Now that house there is the 9-bed ex-sanctuary housing, which is absolutely stunning. The church next door is owned by the daughters of the guy from The Real Thing. Do you remember the band in Liverpool? Samir Everything? He was the landlord and his daughters run it now. But that's a wonderful property, that. Absolutely knockout. There we are. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, John.
It's back to me now, not Brian. I've just got a couple more co-ops to cover. I hope everyone's thoroughly inspired so far. So the next co-op we're talking about is one of our oldest co-ops and our biggest co-op, Lodge Lane East, which is based in Toxteth. They were established in 1975. They're our largest co-op with 210 properties. Back in 2016-17, they identified a vacant site in their area, which was owned by Liverpool City Council, who apparently didn't even know they owned it. So after negotiations, the co-op bought that site from the City Council, and they built 3 new flats, which are fully wheelchair accessible. And that development was funded by a capital grant from Homes England and from their own reserves. They did buy development services in from Airwell Valley Homes in Manchester, and they are currently continuing on a programme of acquisition and refurbishing more properties in the area. And in fact, they completed purchase of another one only yesterday. Next slide, please. This is the opening of that scheme with, again, dignitaries and committee members and various people in the background. I see Kevin there and Phil. Next slide, which is my last one, is Holy Land Housing Co-op in Dingle. They've been going since 1977. They own 118 properties in the Holy Land, so named because all the streets are named after books of the Bible. We've got Jacob, Isaac, David, and I think there's one more, but I can't remember which one it is. They've got plans to acquire property. Moses, that's it. Moses, Jacob, Isaac, and David. So they bought a property on the open market last year. The owner of the property passed away, and he had mentioned to his family that when he passed away, he would like the property to be offered to the co-op, because it was originally a co-op property many years ago. So after much negotiation, the co-op bought the property in 2020, refurbished it, and the entire costs of the purchase and the refurb were met from the co-op's reserves. Next slide, Paul. And this is just a photo of the finished product, which is one of our surveyors on the right, Paul, the builder on the left, Steve, and the chair of the co-op, and one of our board members, Sandra, in the middle. And I think it's now over to Brian to talk about Huyton's current development. You, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Brian O'Hare. I'm chairman of Huyton Cooperative for the Elderly. As you can see, we were established in 1984. A fellow councillor had a chat with us and was explaining the difficulty of finding accommodation for elder people, suitable accommodation. like bungalows. Joined forces with the Council for Elderly People. It was a committee of elderly people, and then started off working in as a cooperative. It took us a couple of years to build our first units, which we built 25, which were houses and bungalows and flats. And then 2 years later, we built another block of bungalows, 39 bungalows. So we've done very well with them. They've been fully occupied, and our communities in both sites are very well on. 2.5 years ago with the CCH, we heard about this funding that was made available from the government, the Community Housing Fund, that would help build new co-ops or extend co-ops. So we started work in June 2018 to develop this. We applied for feasibility funding. Being a councillor at that time, I was able to chat with the council, and we were able to have an option on a small piece of land where we had a community centre, and also that the planning would be granted if we purchased the land and wanted to build on it. So we went ahead, done the feasibility, got the planning, now we've got the funding, and lucky enough, we started work in January this year to build our bungalows, and hopefully by September we'll be able to move in. We've got the Earl Valley Homes, who are our development managers, and hopefully things will go well, and we'll extend with the new 6 bungalows. And that's the pre-launch actually, but yes.
Thanks, Brian. I think it's Kevin now.
Okay, thanks everybody. Over to myself. How are we doing for time?
You're right at the moment, Kevin.
Good,
You've got
good.
15 minutes.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. Well, yeah. Good evening, everybody. I know I've seen a lot of faces that I know on the call today. So fantastic to see everybody giving their Tuesday evening up to get involved. Show of interest. I'm Finance Director at North West Housing Services, and I've worked with housing cooperatives back to the CDS days, as Phil alluded to earlier in the intro, for some 20, 25 years now, something like that. So it's quite a long way back. So I've seen quite a lot in those years. But what I haven't seen is a real growth or surge in the size of the sector, which is probably the missing link to it all, really, because as you've got a flavour of today, the cooperative model is such a it's a fantastic model, and such a fantastic solution for housing, how people in housing need, and how you can take control of your own housing situation. But the opportunities or the ground, should we say, is not being fertile enough, maybe in recent until recently, to give more people that opportunity to get into cooperative housing. I think, just linking back to Nic's slide quickly before, 0.6% of the total supply of housing is cooperative community led. It's pretty disappointing. So I think when the community led housing agenda has been taken off in recent years, and all the fantastic work being done nationally, contribution from CCH for the community led homes, and now all the regions linking into that, it's great to see the progress being made in the Liverpool region. And as Phil alluded to before, North West Housing Services supporting that greatly. Fantastic work by Paul, and Safe Regeneration doing the host work, and all the organisations collaborating to get us to this position and the breaking ground, and all culminating in this launch of this festival, which is really exciting. So it's great to be part of that. For my sins, I'm also on the steering group of the Liverpool City Region Breaking Ground Hub. I've thoroughly enjoyed the journey so far, but look forward to see where it goes from here. And I'm also involved down the M62 as well. I've been working on the Greater Manchester Hub work as well, so that's been a really interesting experience, and bringing the learning from both sides, because I think the cooperative sector, this community-led sector, we're not in competition here. It's a genuine collaboration and cooperation of like-minded people who want to change the shape of future housing supply. Really, that's the ambition really with all of this. So I'll just touch on a few points, a few ideas maybe to get the questions and answers and the thoughts provoked really on what we can do to really change those stats and change the dynamic and move it from niche to mainstream. I think probably a good strap line from the development, the renaissance of the community-led housing movement and interest that's been raised in the last few years is how does it move from niche to mainstream? It's no doubt about it, the sector has been very niche to date. How do we get it to become a mainstream housing option? In the menu of options when people are looking at their future housing solution and affordable housing solutions. Touching on potential growth then, so I think just linking back to Nic's really, just reinforcing some of that as well in the national scene. It's the same principle really. Growing the existing co-op, it's great to see what Nic's doing with his own co-op and how they've now sort of had a space of growth really after, and I guess he's probably in a similar position where a long-established co-op and suddenly there's been this renewed interest and availability of finance and support and interest, which is enabling that to happen. And similar to the examples you've just seen now from colleagues and co-op members on what's happening with some of the co-ops locally as well. Yeah, so the existing co-ops, there's great potential there. There's untapped potential, I would suggest, for them to grow a lot more. And they're long established and mature organisations. They've got good balance sheets, good reserves, the abilities there. So the potential is definitely there to grow the existing co-ops, sure, and increase numbers that way. And of course, the route is set up new ones, set up new groups, new co-ops. And we've seen some of that happening in cooperative models and mutual models. The community land trust model is very popular, fast-growing model, and it's a form of co-op democratic and cooperative organisation, more of a multi-stakeholder cooperative, should we say? The membership and governance of it is done very differently, but maybe there's some of the answers as to what's needed to create these new models and new interest. A different approach with multi-stakeholder cooperatives as opposed to conventional, tenants-only cooperatives. I'm just throwing those ideas out there of what the new wave of co-ops could potentially look like. And scale as well. How do we get scale? Because small cooperatives in their own right, there's only so much they can potentially do, and all the governance and the strings attached to that. So, secondary cooperative model which North West has, that's an example of how cooperatives can come together, small cooperatives, and build scale and take care of their own common needs in a cooperative way. So the cooperatives can be interesting models to scale up and develop, the primary co-ops and realise groups' ambitions. And so that scale question that Nic asked before, the opportunities there, the thinking needs to be done, and maybe there's some new models which can be creative, which still achieve the same results: management, stewardship, control of the properties and the cooperatives, but how the properties and the land and all that sit, the logistics of all that sort of stuff. Maybe we don't have to get too excited about that. Maybe there's more innovative ways to bring that together in a smarter way, still achieve the same results, I would suggest. So just looking at opportunities. So what are the opportunities? As I say, it's been a renaissance of interest in community-led housing in the last few years with the Community Housing Fund, which was set up, and all the regional hubs and the work which is culminating in this festival today and why we're here today. I think just to add to that, it's probably the most people have ever seen at a cooperative event in Merseyside in my 25 years. So I think we've already made some good headway, I think it's fair to say. And it shows you maybe the power of this new medium and the way people are thinking and working of raising awareness and getting interest with social media and these platforms. So that ability to get the message out there and move from under the radar might be greater than ever, really. So with these mediums, fantastic. And the grants, I think another barrier in recent years was the availability of grants and the ability to access it for smaller groups. I think as the larger housing association sector sort of has been the sort of main player really in building new housing supply, and played an important role. Helping more affordable housing would have been coming through the pipeline in those recent years, but the cooperative movement has stood still in that, and the community-led housing movement. But the grants and the, as you say, the awareness raising of community-led housing and the grants, the grant availability is now improved for the affordable housing programme, 8K again, as Nic referred to before. Sorry about the abbreviation, but as Home England offers that grant availability. Other opportunities, so stock transfers, again, in John Fairhurst's sort of presentation there on Printers Park and their recent growth space, and some of the levers for that. Stock transfers were a part of that, really. So we already talked about the price, because that was like registered provider to registered provider. Printers Park are a long-established housing cooperative and a registered provider in their own right, a bit smaller. So the bigger registered providers that were trying to divest from those areas, and the local cooperative solution, which see the potential and knew how to solve the problem, stood in, and they reached a mutually sort of beneficial arrangement there to transfer the property on favourable terms, friendly terms, should we say? And that was a good opportunity, and we got to appeal to the better nature of bigger associations. So that's probably a task for the breaking ground and the hub to sort of break down those barriers with bigger associations and understand that it's keeping the housing in the affordable housing, social housing, as opposed to going out to the wider market. So maybe the opportunities are there to do more of that, for sure, I would suggest. Acquisitions, again, some of the other cooperatives have now been acquiring some properties, pepper-potted properties, which are just available on the market in their vicinity. It's a good solution to take control of the neighbourhood and the cooperative having a bigger influence. But it's not the most viable solution, unfortunately. But I think in small scale it can be done. But you're effectively buying properties in the market price and trying to charge affordable rents on them. So the sums don't always stack up that well on them. So you're effectively cross-subsidising such acquisitions. But the ultimate end goal is you're bringing more properties in community-led housing and putting someone into a better than your situation if they become a cooperative member, as opposed to going out to the private market. So that's another avenue. Peer-to-peer support, and there's so many ways that can be done. I guess from North West Housing's perspective, as John alluded to before, the secondary cooperative model creates a sort of mutual support mechanism whereby some of the capital raised by North West Housing Services can now be reinvested back to the membership. So the membership, set their own members' loan fund for their own mutual benefit. So that's self-help solutions, cooperative solutions, in innovative ways, using cooperative capital to support the growth, the growth of more cooperatives without taking undue risk. The clever ways of financing some of these things in different ways, and of course, people as well. We've got experience, knowledge. I'm a chartered accountant by background. Financial skills, financial viability, I guess, is my speciality, and I'm trying to help and give that help and support. Working as a steering group member on the hub, a couple of regional hubs, and also director of a community-led housing project that's sort of getting off the ground as well. Safe regeneration. So I'm putting my time and energy. So it's not just financial resources; it's skills as well that I needed. So it's needing us the next point. Sustainable enabling hub. This is key to it all, isn't it? This is probably been the missing ingredient, the driving force behind stunting the growth of the community-led housing sector. Without sustainable enabling hubs and organisations actively doing the work that Paul started in the Liverpool City region and breaking ground, and the right collaborations and support partnerships that are required to build all local authorities, housing associations, specialist skills and community activists. Then without all that, nothing really happens, or it's not really practical. It's not really so that's key, really. The sustainable enabling hub that's here to stay, and it's going to be sustainable beyond a year or two. Sort of initial seed call funding that we've got now today, I think is going to be pertinent to making all of this, the potential reality, really. Next slide there, please. So, but there are obstacles, there's still clearly challenges, notwithstanding the need for support and the enabling hub. But there's still clear obstacles to overcome to get more new cooperatives off the ground, grow existing cooperatives, new models, and they've got to be navigated, and they need a lot of, there's a lot of work and a lot of know-how to be put in place to navigate through this. I mean, development risk, smaller groups, smaller people, smaller groups of people, smaller cooperatives taking on development risk. It's a risky thing to navigate through. taking on new properties, raising new finance. How does that impact your existing co-op? So all the settled existing cooperative, which has been established for 30, 40 years, low rents, good services, great maintenance, all those things. You know, if it takes on more risk, does it risk? You know, does it jeopardise its own future in that sense? So you've got to, the decision makers of these cooperatives have got to you know, be open to that, be open to a degree of risk, and sweat those balance sheets a bit more. But there is undoubtedly risk, and the cost of development. You know, yes, you know, some of the schemes which we're working with at the moment, some of the new developments, some of the new pipeline schemes in the hub itself. You know, the cost of development, conventional costs of building these things seem to be going up and up. So whilst it's great that there's more grant finance to subsidise it, if the costs are going north at the same time, then it sort of negates the benefits of the higher grant rate. So we've got to find more innovative ways of developing and building these schemes. I was involved, just a quick example, I was involved with housing people building communities in Kingsley Road. So that was the local charity we owned in Liverpool, Habitat for Humanity in the day. Some of you might be familiar with it. So I was on their board for a while. They, you know, they innovated in the build costs. You know, getting equity, donations of labour from big developers that were doing big schemes in the city. So innovative ways in building things for lower cost. Because ultimately, you know, the cost of things will determine what rents can be charged and how effective, and what's left to effectively manage and maintain the properties for the long term, not just for tomorrow. So the cost of development is an important thing as well, which is an obstacle at the moment, I would say. Smarter ways of developing value for money. Access to loan finance, so any groups that want to start up, as Nic alluded to before, he's now took on his co-op in Birmingham has now took on a load of new debt, as well as enjoying the grant finance. But they've got the financial capacity to deal with servicing that new debt as well as the new properties as well. But it's still daunting, and even for an established group, so a newer group who've got no track record, you know, how to raise the money required. So in the Liverpool, in our region, the Liverpool City region, you know, the breaking ground doing to try and build partnerships, appeal to the local authority, the combined authority, providing financial support or access to finance. You know, just to give an example, down the work of Greater Manchester, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority has a housing investment fund, for argument's sake, so they're very keen to finance some of these initiatives. So the loan finance solution is based in those regions with the political will and political support. So, you know, and innovation like that, potentially in the Liverpool City region, would bring down a big barrier towards financing some of these schemes. To implement the grant finance, the loan finance is also required. In the registered provider status, you know, that's no small matter. I think the stats where the average time, and I know some of the groups have achieved this that have been developing or of course in recent years, but it's still a huge process and a very bureaucratic process to prove that, you know, to get registered provider status and the governance arrangements that you need to put in place for a small organisation you've set up is incredibly onerous. As some of you will be aware, I think the average time for those organisations that have managed to get over the line so far is about 60 weeks. It's not a quick fix. So it's another big impediment, as well as building the things and getting the scheme delivered. Becoming a registered provider in your own right is a problem. And again, there's been lobbying in the sector, I know, to look at maybe micro provider and a bit more proportionate to smaller providers. But at the moment, the threshold is still over 1,000 units or less. You know, the governance requirements for registered provider is still the same. So it is still an obstacle and a barrier and a challenge for the sector. Land availability, of course, you know, that's the biggest challenge of all, really. So again,
Kevin, sorry, you've got about 2 minutes.
Okay, that's about fine. That's perfect. Thanks, Paula.
That's okay.
Yeah. So availability of land, I guess we can touch on that in the Q&A session a little bit, but yeah, it is a huge difficulty. Although again, encouraging to see some some more initiatives emerging in the press in the last few days. In the Church of England, they're talking about their land and resources up for social good as opposed to, private or market profit. So there might be a great opportunity there for this sector to partner up with that and access some land and assets, at a more favourable rate as opposed to having to pay the market prices. So there's opportunities there, and that's indeed the example I quoted before about housing people building communities. They were gifted the land and the church site from the archdiocese there. So they developed an affordable housing scheme as a consequence of all of that. So, but there's a need for support. That's the obstacle. So that's what's been missing, and they're the things we're trying to build and put in place. And great work done to date from Breaking Ground. Paul's work to date with this festival. I think I'm hugely personally, on a personal level, very encouraged about the potential and realising the untapped potential of the sector. And I look forward to many more of these sessions over the coming years. And hopefully this isn't, as you say, the sustainability of the hub and this activity and this action make things happen. And the collective will of certainly everyone who's participating today and other people that we need to bring to the table will be key to realising the ambition of the sector. It's looking as encouraging as it's done since I've been in the sector, and that's quite a long time. Despite its young face, there's quite a bit of experience in there in the co-op housing sector. That's it from me. Thank you, everybody.
Right, lovely. Thank you. So thank you for everyone from North West Housing. It's great to hear about the opportunities for the communities to establish new housing co-ops. And thank you for sharing your stories. North West Housing, I'll just say well done for the support that you give the co-ops, to achieve. I think it's brilliant. And also well done to those of you, I think, who've developed. You're a great inspiration to us all and gives us others food for thought. So for those of us that may be thinking about developing my own co-op actually in Kent, you'll give me some invaluable pointers on where to go to get some help. It's quite invaluable. So carry on with the strong legacy of cooperative housing in Merseyside. I feel embarrassed down where I live in Kent because we don't do anything. But I should be taking it back to Kent. You laugh, Nick. Hello, and I feel, so you give me some great inspiration there. So I have noticed as well that there's some questions and chat going on in the chat rooms there. So I presume some of you probably answered some of the questions. Paul, have you got questions that have come in already? Or we're asking people to ask now?
I don't know if we can bring in Kath, because I've not been able to see the chat while sharing. Kath,
yes.
Do you want to?
Catherine.
To be honest, it's been a lot of feedback about how inspiring all of this is, and the energy and what people are learning from it. There was a particular question from Mark from New Ferry in terms of what are the advantages and disadvantages of co-op as opposed to a CLT, because New Ferry have set up a CLT, but then Nick was giving responses in the chat anyway. But maybe a benefit to everyone else if you just want to sort of summarise what you said there, Nick.
Well, all I was just saying, I mean, it really depends on what people are trying to do as to which model is the right thing to do. I mean, I was just making the point that generally speaking, a CLT is about a sort of neighbourhood-based organisation where, if you're talking about people who live in an area wanting to have an influence on what housing gets built in that area, that's kind of more the CLT model. If you're kind of looking at sort of something where, a bunch of potential residents want to live in a scheme that's built, then it's probably more the cooperative model. But these are general rules of thumb, and what we kind of sort of say about models is like, you need to look at the specific circumstances of what you're trying to do, and then match the whole thing depending on what it is that you're trying to do. Sorry, Paul, the other example I was just giving, and somebody was talking about Lowfield Green. I don't know. I was just typing away, Mary. I couldn't see all the faces, so I don't know who it was. But somebody was talking about Lowfield Green, which is is a housing co-op in York, which is being developed by the Your Space, which is a community land trust. So these things, often can work together. You can mix and match and do whatever you want. Anyway, there you go, Paul.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate really what you've said, Nick, and I think it's really important that when groups start their process, their journey, that they really look and explore at the options to pick what's right for them. And sometimes I think in Liverpool we've had the big co-op revolution. We've recently had a real focus on community land trusts. This afternoon we had a session on co-housing, and we haven't really got a co-housing scheme in this region yet. And it's about groups really looking at their potential options and what fits best for their situation. I couldn't agree more with Nick, and having that expert advice to do that. And it's interesting, for instance, home-based community land trusts at the moment are looking at building their first properties, 8 properties, but the potential of that being a co-op that's established to manage the properties as a new body. So there were lots of really innovative ways of doing this, and I think it's about exploring them and working out what's right for your group. And building actually on all the experience. What the great thing about Liverpool is we've got all this knowledge and experience going back a long period.
Catherine?
Can I just ask a couple of questions? Because I've sort of been dipping into quite a lot of these sessions during the festival. And one of the things that's come up, and it's not specific to co-ops, it's to do with sort of community-led housing generally, I guess, but to me, I get a sense with co-ops, it needs to be even stronger, is how do you retain that energy and that buy-in to what the cooperative's about? Because quite a few of those examples, those cooperatives have existed for quite a period of time. So maintaining that whole, the principle of what a cooperative is about, as opposed to people moving in because they charge incredibly low rents in comparison to everyone else. And the other question was around finance. I was interested to hear what North West Housing was saying with regard to loans that they provide for cooperatives, where that comes from, what sort of preferential rates that involves. Just trying to understand that a little bit as well.
Right, if Phil, Earl, you wanted to say something, then John McGuigan, you need to unmute Phil, and then maybe Kevin could answer about the financing. Phil, you've got us.
Sorry, Paul. No, I think it's John and then Kevin. I'm okay with that.
Oh, all right, John first. Then there, go on. That's fine.
Yeah, just to answer Kat's question about energy, it is a dilemma for the co-ops, because a lot of the co-ops committee members are either the original ones from 25, 30 years ago, or they're getting older. So one of our committee members is here at the minute, Jimmy McKenna. He's been a member for 30 odd years. It is difficult to get the younger ones involved, but we try and encourage the co-ops to include the younger members, to invite them to meetings, see what it's all about, offer training. But it is a dilemma for them, I've got to admit.
Kevin?
Yeah, just to answer the loan financing innovation, I guess, that we created in North West Housing. So that's a members loan fund. So the members of North West. So as Phil alluded to before, we're not for profit. So the surplus that we make, the members determine what we do with that. So some of it is rebated back to members each year, so like the cooperative dividend, almost like on the cost of services. And then we retain a balance for sort of future need of the company, safety net of the company. And when you retain that balance, then you've got a bit of capital in the cooperative. So the capital can then be, rather than sitting in a bank earning nothing, it can be loaned out to its members who control. So it's mutually beneficial in that sense. At preferential rate, yet very, very unbureaucratic. Not if you need to borrow conventional finance for a cooperative, even an established cooperative, it's a long-winded and very bureaucratic process and costly. Legal fees, valuation fees, security, everything else. Whereas because we're a mutual organisation and most of them are registered providers, the risk is fairly minimal, really, and it's the members themselves choosing what to do with their own capital. So they're borrowing to themselves effectively. So it's a clever solution, and it could be scaled up. We've only done it. We've been doing it incrementally thus far. So, and it's worked to date, and it's enabled probably financed 20 or 30 new cooperative homes in the last 5-6 years since we've created it. So these are part of the solution. It's not the absolute solution, but it's part of the mix. And you know, the co-ops could do it. Could scale that up as well. And you know, there's an appetite for our co-ops to do more of that as well, if the conditions are right, which they are at the moment to grow the. So that's where the opportunity to grow the existing co-ops is really fertile, because there's financing solutions with grants and loan, you know, self-financing on some of the loan arrangements really enable some of that, you know.
Right. Can I just? There's a question that's come in. So from Jen. So she's saying that the housing cooperatives in Liverpool are inspiring, but when was the last one set up? Because she said we need new co-ops for a diverse and sustainable housing co-op sector. So if one of you could answer that, of you Liverpool ones.
Yeah, I'll answer it, Paul, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go on, John.
I think the last one would have been late 80s, which is a long time ago. I know there's a few new ones hoping to set up, one of which is Jen's Co-op. I'm not sure if Jen's Co-op is registered yet, but it's been a long time since any new co-ops were set up in Merseyside.
Can I? We are registered persons unknown, and at the moment we're looking for solutions to try and either buy property or develop to do a new build. And we've been looking around doing so much research over the past few years and putting all the work in. We've got our 40-year business plan, we've got a financial forecast, but it's at the moment still unaffordable, because back in the 80s it was much easier. And we're looking at the moment to try and make this discussion happen between some of the older co-ops and new co-ops, and we want to help other new co-ops to set up as well. We want to make a model which can be used again and again to make more co-ops and to make this cooperative housing kind of boom in Liverpool. Like, the potential is there for. So we're hosting a discussion at 2 p.m. on Sunday with some people who are going to talk about some solutions for the older co-ops. And also, we are just so passionate about housing co-ops and inspired by all of you guys. So that's why it's great to come here and hear you and hear what you've done and all the great things you can offer to your co-ops. I'm inspired, and come to our talk on Sunday, and we'll talk about some ways that we can maybe help some of the older co-ops to feel more cooperative as well, and maybe have this mutual aid relationship between the two.
Okay, thank you. Just want to go on to you, Nick. I did have an answer back from Gulthia or something. Rose Howie Housing Co-op was set up around 2012 in Liverpool. But it's unregistered apparently. Is that right, John? Yeah, Nick, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I wanted to give a bit more of a glass half full answer to the question about sort of the sustainability of the existing housing co-ops. I mean, like, you know, many of the sort of existing housing co-ops have been going for 30 or 40 odd years, which is an incredible record for sort of, you know, community organisations, and they've gone through many generations of members in some cases, you know what I mean, and they're still going strong. You know, I mean, we had a number. I mean, when most of these co-ops were set up in the 70s and 80s, there were a number of co-ops that we lost along the way. But since about the 1990s, you know, there's been a sustainable number of them for, you know, about 250 odd across the country that have remained in place for many years. And, you know, in terms of what's going on in those co-ops, I mean, yeah, you've got people involved in the governance who've been there for a long time, but you're also getting some new people coming in. And I think a lot of it is to do with actually understanding that the actual active involvement in these co-ops is not just about being the people on the governing body. It's, you know, these are fantastic community organisations, and a lot of what actually happens in these organisations is what I would call sort of over the garden fence involvement, as in people just talking to each other and just helping each other out. You know, that's what sustains, I think, a lot of the organisations. You know, it's like it's just people being there for each other and, you know, walking the dog and looking after the kids and doing the shopping or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? These real things that make a lot of difference to people's lives. You know, that's what's sitting there. In terms of the issues of financing new co-ops and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it is challenging. I mean, I don't want to underestimate that. But look, I just keep making the point here, where there is a will, there is a way. You know, there are new co-ops being set up across the country and new other forms of community-led housing. You know, it is possible to do it. It may not generate exactly the same results as the sort of old co-ops that were set up in the 70s and 80s. It may not be quite the same, but there are ways of doing it because we know it's being done. You know what I mean? That's what I was trying to point out in my presentation, in those three models I was highlighting, is there are people doing it. Let's do it. And I mean, you know, Paul's the man. He's going to make it all happen. There's going to be hundreds of co-ops next week, and Paul's going to do it.
Paula.
Yeah, sorry, Phil. Yeah, and then Tony Norbury.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I just thought that might be a timely moment for Paul just to explain. I mean, everyone here may know, but how the hub is going to support emerging groups like Unknown, for example. And how you can act as a sort of conduit to advice from others as well, I guess.
Yeah, just very quickly. So one big thing is about just raising the information that people have. So if we weren't in lockdown, we intend to spend the next 2 years on a permanent roadshow across the 6 authority region areas in our region, letting people know the options, because I think people have to have the knowledge. They have to know that these are potential options. And you know, we've got some areas where there's real potential to develop these, whether it's Huyton or Wirral. There's a real appetite for this new approach to keeping wealth in our communities and doing things differently. So we've got to share first the possibilities and use all these examples to inspire people, and that's what we started with this festival, and then provide the expert support to get projects going. And we've been working with Jen at Persons Unknown. We've also got a new boaters cooperative being established by the end of March that will be looking at setting up a cooperative moorings for people who want to live on boats, because you know, we're a city based on water, and people living on boats keep getting moved along and paying massive costs to live on water. So we'll have a cooperative mooring set up, and maybe that could be part of the Wirral Waters development. And so there's huge potential here, and it's really exciting hearing how we can make this happen.
Okay. Tony Norbury, sorry, I can't see the hands, so I'm relying on people to tell me.
Yeah, I just put my hand down to save any confusion. Absolutely fabulous day of learning regarding community housing and cooperative housing, CLTs. On Wirral, I'm a councillor on Wirral, and we've got ourselves embroiled in this growth company, which is a partnership between Wirral Borough Council and a developer, a corporate developer. I don't know if any other people recognise this sort of arrangement in any other councils or city regions, and how we can embed cooperative models into that. I don't think it's a model that lends itself to that, but I'd really like to get some advice on how we can get out of that particular model and move more into a cooperative model. Our growth company basically is a 50-50 partnership between the council and a corporate developer, and we've sort of given some of our land to the corporate developer for them to develop stuff on, really, which is basically corporate development stuff, shiny buildings that I don't think will give any social value to the community, apart from maybe producing jobs and some amenity space. So I was just wondering if anyone had any experience of that, and how we can map in any cooperative models into that particular model. Thank you.
Ed, who's going to answer that one?
I could come in on that a little bit. I mean, I think partly it's about working with the local authorities to understand the potential, and it's interesting. We're working on a site in Huyton. Actually, it was open for a design competition last year, and one of the bidders that went in for it wanted to include community-led models as part of it, on quite a scale potentially of the vehicle that would own the site would be a community land trust potentially, but quite a significant site. And I think it's about how we use the knowledge that's out there to look at scaling this up. And it's interesting, this has become something very driven nationally as well. Places like Cambridge are doing some really interesting, innovative stuff in terms of how they're growing Cambridge, but who owns what is developed. And I think particularly the situation we're in Liverpool at the moment, there's a real opportunity, and what Breaking Ground is being really clear about is there's a real opportunity to put back some very, very clear, transparent processes around how we develop our land in this city and this region moving forward, and how community-led plays a part in that. And we launched a charter on Saturday that includes the desire that, you know, we would like every local authority to adopt policies that means that any land that they look to offload from their own, that they own, has to have community-led aspects to it in terms of the agreements made. And that's all about embedding it in policy. And I think, you know, we've got all this incredible history in this city. This city should be leading nationally in terms of how community-led, this is just how we do things. But to do that, it has to be embedded. It has to be part of strategic responses. And I think I said before, Liverpool is about to adopt this as part of their housing strategy, but we need all the local authorities to do that, and then look at how they can implement and support North West Housing, the hub, and groups to actually then deliver on a scale. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of a bit of the context of what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
I'd just like to just say, Tony, I mean, in terms of what you're talking about there, I mean, I need to know a bit more about the full details of what's going on there. But, I think if you wanted to have a discussion between, myself, Paul, and maybe somebody from North West Housing Services, just to thrash around some ideas with what you're talking about, I mean, I think it is possible to do it. There's a comment in the chat about sort of, what's going on in the local plan, and I agree that that's probably something that needs to be explored. But we can have a bit of a discussion about what's potentially possible, but we need to know a little bit more details about what's going on at the minute.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. That's great. I really like the idea of the charter. I missed the launch, but the charter being adopted by Earl and across the Liverpool City region rather than just Liverpool would be absolutely fantastic.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the last one now. It's going to be Terry Irvin. Are you there, Terry?
Yes, I didn't have a question. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Have we got any more Paul with their hand up or not? No. So some of the comments coming in on the chat really is just saying goes to what Tony Norbury and Paul was saying with regards to just the embedding of things into local plans, embedding it into policy. So obviously that's just what they're saying about going into the local authority, housing and planning strategies. Everyone agreeing really about that as well. So there was just a last one here. Is says, hi Rebecca, not sure where that figure comes from for the co-ops. Do have reserves established to meet future liabilities such as major repairs. I think yes, somebody's answered that. Let's have a quick look what else. We're looking at a template SPD for community-led housing in Kent. Oh, good luck with that. We've got no CLT or anything at all in Kent. We've just got co-ops, less than 10, and that is it. We have got our
make it happen, Paula. Make it happen.
I'm on at the hub now. It's getting the right people, Nick. That's the problem. So if that's, I hope you've really found it interesting, because I have. Does Northwest want to say anything just to close the session, or Paul?
No, sorry, maybe me first. Just to say, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks everybody for joining. As I said earlier, we're really interested in working with the hub. I think new and emerging groups, we don't want to step on the hub's toes. So I think their first port of call is the hub. But I think Paul knows he can contact us if he thinks we can help with anything.
Absolutely.
I'd just like to thank Paul for arranging the session, and I think Kath, who's been, sitting behind the scenes making technical things happen and so on that probably nobody knows about. Well done, Kath.
Yeah,
and well done, Paul. And well done, Paula, for coming in and sharing it for us.
Yeah, I was a bit blind. I'm sorry. It was such a last minute thing, and I wasn't sure who everybody was. I knew a lot of Northwest, but Paul, thank you. As I said, I know who you are now. So.
And can I just thank you all? I think it's really important that, you know, everything that the community-led housing movement's doing here is building on your shoulders, and it is really inspiring to see Brian and everybody talking about projects that have happened here over a 40, 50-year period. And I think, you know, we've all got to push open this door now to really get more and more projects going. So I just really want to thank you for your time. We have recorded this, and we will put it up. And just to let you know that tomorrow night, we've got New Ferry Community Land Trust. Mark is here talking about their journey. And then on Thursday, we've got quite a packed day looking at housing and the LGBT community. Calder Valley Community Land Trust talking about their recent community share offer. We've got Sea Salt, a student housing cooperative in Brighton that is so inspiring, and we need to get a student housing co-op going in Liverpool. And then we've got Granby 4 Streets on Thursday. So packed programme, so many models. It's just going to be a brilliant year. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your positive comments that have all come up in the chat. Everybody's enjoyed it for today, so well done all of you. And everyone have a nice rest of your evening. Thank you for attending.
Thanks Paula. Well cheered.
That's okay.
Thanks,
All right, see you all later. I've got to go and do another one now. I've got a 3-hour one now. All right then, see you all later. Cheers.